Welcome back to the project module. This is your lecture 2. My name is Rakhshnada Hameed. Let's get started. Right, we covered some ground rules in the lecture 1. Please make sure you adhere to all of these throughout your studies. Before we start, just a quick recap from the previous lecture. In the lecture 1, we discussed about the learning outcomes of the project module overall. Then we discussed what research project is, what research is. We covered about research proposal, what a research proposal is, which is actually a written plan of your research project. Why it is important to give a research proposal. We covered the components of research proposal, which are your title, your background, aims and objectives, methodologies and all. So just to reiterate that for this current module, project module, you will not be doing the primary research, you will be doing secondary research, right? No primary data will be collected. That means you will not be going out and doing interviews with the customer or doing interviews with your population or collecting data, or you will not be doing surveys. You will be doing secondary research. You will be more clear about primary and secondary research in the coming lectures. So for this current lecture 2, we will be covering research methodology, what research methodology is, what qualitative research is, what quantitative research is, and we'll briefly touch what a literature review is. Right, research methodology. Research methodology, when we talk about research, methodology is basically a general guideline or a principle which guides your research, right? There's a difference in term methods and methodology. Methodology is an overarching broad term, and methods is the steps or tools, techniques that you take in to achieve to achieve the goal, right? Like we discussed in the lecture 1, aims is an overall goal, an overarching bigger goal of the project. Objectives are the small steps that you take to achieve that goal, to achieve the aim. Similarly, method is a small term subset of methodology. Methodology is a broad term. What methodology includes? Methodology includes the design of the study, what design you're actually using, includes information about population, what population you're accessing. Let's say, for example, we will take an example from lecture 1, like importance of exercise or fitness session to reduce childhood obesity. In that case, your population is under 5 children. What research instrument you will be using, we'll discuss more about these in the coming lectures. So methodology covers everything basically. Going through some of the examples, like we said, methodology or research approach, they are the broader term. What methodology you're using is quite a broad term. Then we narrow it down to methods, techniques, and tools. Look at these examples here, qualitative, quantitative, or mixed, right? This is an approach to the research, right? Research methodology or approach. It can be qualitative or quantitative or mixed, right? An example of quantitative research is a survey. An example of qualitative research is interviews or focus groups. And when we talk about techniques or tools, it can be an interview, let's say survey interview using Microsoft Teams. This is a technique. An interview conducted through SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey is a technique or a tool. We're conducting one-to-one interviews. Now, one-to-one interviews is can be a type of qualitative or quantitative interviews, but we're doing face-to-face interviews, or if you're using any recorder to record the interviews, that's a tool that you're using within your research method. When it comes to research design, is a description of step-by-step process where you will be taking to achieve your aims and objectives. Now, research design should clearly indicate how you're planning to do your research, how you're going to collect your data, how you're doing it. If it's interviews, how you're going to conduct your interviews. Are you going to go by yourself and do the face-to-face interviews? Are you going to be using Microsoft Teams? Are you going to be using any of the tools or techniques to do those interviews? So research design should clearly indicate all of that information. Right, coming back to the types of research, right? Research can be either quantitative or it can be qualitative. Quantitative type of research is more about numbers, right? It's based on testing a theory. It's more testable, right? It's more about numbers, right? Statistics, percentages, proportions, whatever we can give, like with numbers and statistics, that's more related to quantitative. That is a type of quantitative research. Right, some examples of quantitative research include any application form which collects responses, any close-ended questionnaires. Close-ended means that you give a couple of options to choose from. Let's say, how often do you go to gym? How often do you go to gym? 1, 2, 3. How often do you do 1, 2, 3? Bear with me 1 second. This is a close-ended option. If you close-ended question, if you give the reader an option, a couple of options, it can be 10 options, they're still close-ended. When you do not give them an option and leave that question like that, let's say, how often do you go to gym? Question mark. And they can fill out a response that's open-ended questions. When it comes to quantitative research, most of the questions that you do are close-ended questions. Measurements, you always talk about numbers, centimeters, kgs, 1, 2, 3, like something that you can measure. When we're talking about numbers, percentages, it's measurable. So this example of quantitative research, I'll give you 2 minutes to read it. The Cure Hospital wants to know the details about doctors and patients of their hospital for the purpose of analysis to be done by the management of the company regarding the working of the hospital. For this purpose, the survey was conducted for getting the information about amount of time which doctor takes for one patient, how often a patient comes into the hospital, what satisfaction level of the patient after taking the consultation of the doctor, and related other questions. Patients were given the template of patient satisfaction survey, which includes the different survey questions having the answer options in numerical form. Numerical means related to numbers. Like answer options to the question, what is the amount of time which the doctor takes for one patient, includes a slab of less than 10 minutes. Like they've given an option of 10 minutes, 10 to 30 minutes, 30 to 50 minutes, and 50 or more than 50 minutes. Answer option to the question, how often a patient comes into the hospital, includes 1 time, 2 to 4 times, 4 to 8 times, and more than 8 times. Look at these examples. It involves closed-ended questions. They've been given a couple of options in this question and in this question. A couple of options: 1 time, 2 to 4 times, 4 to 8 times, and more than 8 times. So quantitative research has mostly closed-ended questions. And now, because it's all related to numbers, is an example of quantitative research. Okay, the answers are gathered in quantifiable data. This is a quantitative research. Are we all clear? This is a type of quantitative research. What can be advantages of quantitative research? It lets the respondent or your population, it's more feasible for them because they can fill up the survey in their own time. The length of the time can be, the study can be longer compared to a telephone. Let's say if you were doing a telephone interview, it has to be small, then it has to be on the specific time. It doesn't give the population or your respondent the feasibility to complete it in their own time. So this is another advantage. The choices can be quite extensive. This is another advantage because they get option to choose from, right? Without the presence of the interviewer, they can be more honest. So that's another advantage because they don't see the researcher, they don't see you while they respond to you. So the chances are they'll be more honest with you. Specific research problem. Address specific research problem. The chances to digress from the main topic are very less because you've designed the survey, you've designed closed-ended questions, you've given a couple of options to choose from, so you will stay very specific to the problem. Right. It does have independent and dependent variable within the research. Independent and dependent variable. What does these mean? As the name suggests, independent will be independent and dependent is dependent on independent. Okay. Now, let's take the example from the previous lecture. The impact of physical activity on childhood obesity. Now, in this case, the childhood obesity is dependent variable, and the fitness session is your independent variable. So when it comes to numbers and quantitative research, you do have a dependent and independent variable within your title or within your project, and it's very specific to the problem. You get closed-ended questions and you get these advantages as well. There's no personal judgment, it's just responses. The respondent can respond in their own time, and they're very specific and no judgments. Well, what are the disadvantages then? Disadvantages can be in the quantitative research. When you send out a survey, let's say for example to the respondents, they can read and reread and then get ready for the responses or kind of research about the question. The most of the chances are that they're going to give you the responses that you want to receive as a researcher. And sometimes they can skip questions as well, right? Because you are not doing it face-to-face. Sometimes they can easily get confused as well. Then they're going to answer it based on their understanding of it, because the researcher is not present face-to-face. They cannot clarify any question, they cannot ask about it, so it can create confusions. The respondent may not fully understand the problem, like I said before. Then they're going to answer, like I said before, based on what you want to hear. Because let's say for example you ask them, how often do you go to gym? Maybe even if they go once a week, they will see that you want to know the importance of the gym. They may say 2 times a week or 3 times a week. And it doesn't give an in-depth information. It's just even though it's very quantifiable, but it's not in-depth. It's not in detail. Right, it can ignore individual perspectives and experiences because it is close-ended. The respondent are given just a couple of options to choose from. It's not very detailed, and it doesn't take an account of the individual perspective or experiences. And it can be very limited in the topics as well. Compared to the quantitative research, now what is qualitative then? The quantitative talks about numbers, values, percentages, close-ended questions, responses. On the other hand, qualitative, it gives you an in-depth understanding of a phenomenon. It's talking about people's experiences, people's words. It's not about numbers, it's about what they're saying, right? When we do one-to-one interviews with the respondent and let them speak in detail about a phenomena, then we quote their words. That's qualitative research. So it gives more importance to holistic description of people's views, people's perceptions, people's experiences. That's all qualitative research. Examples are diary accounts, the reviews, unstructured interviews, unstructured observations, or semi-structured interviews, semi-structured observations. These are a few examples. One-to-one interview, this is a qualitative interview. Then focus groups, you can have 2 to 3 people, 5 people, 10 people in a focus group. Ethnographic research is a qualitative research about people's ethnicity, their experiences. Case studies, you can take just one person, study about them in detail. That's a qualitative research as well. Record keeping, you can just review whatever document is available already, do a qualitative research. That's a qualitative as well. Observation means that you recording or you observing people's expressions, their words. That's a qualitative observation and a type of qualitative research. Now, what are the advantages of qualitative research? As I said, it provides in-depth information about a phenomena, about an experience. It gives an account of the individual experiences, their values, their words, brings more of the respondents, more of the population's voice within research. Then it offers a greater level of flexibility, which means that you can sit with your respondent, explain the phenomena to them. They can ask you questions, and then they can respond as honest as they can. When they talk about the experiences, most of the chances are they give the honest opinion. And when you sat one-to-one with that person, the most of the chances are that they're going to answer honestly. What are the disadvantages, right? There are so many advantages as well, but as anything else, there are disadvantages to it as well. It can be more subject to researcher bias. Now, what researcher bias means? The researcher can be asking questions of their interest, right? Whatever they want to know, they can design it based on their way, and then they can ask the customer. They can ask the respondent, they can ask the population based on their preference. So it can be researcher bias. You always have to be a smaller sample size, because it's not possible to do interviews for, let's say, 100,000. It's not feasible enough to do interviews with 100,000 people, whereas you can just send out a survey, design a survey, send out to 100,000 people and collect a more small sample size as compared to qualitative research. Because doing one-to-one interviews, it's not feasible enough. It's not like humanly possible to do 1,000 interviews as part of any research, right? So sample size comparatively in qualitative research is always small compared to quantitative research. Generalizable, because of the sample size small, it's hard to generalize the findings to a larger subset. Let's say we have a survey from 1,000 or 2,000 people. We can say if 2,000 people are responding to this question or saying this, that means it is good enough for 6,000 people. But we cannot do the same in qualitative research. If you're doing 10 interviews, 12 interviews, you cannot just say that my research says my 12 interviews say this. Now we have to generalize it to like 2,000 people. So that's a bit difficult in qualitative research. But Duplication of findings. In quantitative research, when you say about something solid, you say, I've done this survey, these are the questions, it's easy to duplicate. It's easy for another researcher to take the same survey and do it in another population, but that's not the case in qualitative. It's very time consuming, it requires more time to do those interviews, it requires more time to analyze the findings, so it is quite time consuming compared to quantitative research. Less rigidity, people's views change over time, right? Let's say they've said something in one interview, after 6 months they had a different experience, now they've changed the views. So rigidity is very less. That's why reliability of finding is very less as well. An example of qualitative research: a healthcare assistant help manage patients' daily care. A care home aims to explore the views of healthcare assistant, GPs, and patients on the value and development of the role of care assistant in practice. The data collected by using semi-structured interviews is a type of interview involving 7 care homes in Birmingham. This is an example of qualitative research. So a healthcare, we are interested in views of healthcare assistant, GPs, and patients. Views on what? Their value and development and role of care assistant in practice. So the interviews have been conducted, semi-structured interviews, so it's an example of qualitative research. Now, so far we've talked about types of researchers, right? Quantitative research, qualitative research. We've talked about advantages, disadvantages of qualitative and quantitative research. And before that, we've talked about what research design is, what research methodology is, and what research approaches. Methodology and approaches are a broader term than method is a subset of methodology. Techniques and tools are actually the tools that you use, like your surveys, your one-to-one interviews, Microsoft Teams. These are the techniques and tools. So these are the broad terms. And then within those research methods, we have 2 types of research methods: quantitative research, qualitative research. We've discussed the advantages, disadvantages of both qualitative and quantitative. Now, before we move on, just to let you guys know that qualitative and quantitative research, we've discussed advantages and disadvantages of both of them, but there's no right or wrong. They both hold as importance as each other. There's no preferred approach. It depends on the topic that you choose, that which method you can be using, right? You can do a mixed method, you can do the survey, you can do the in-depth interviews, but it depends on the choice, on the topic that you're discussing, right? Which method you can be using. They both hold same importance in the research world. There's not one method is preferred over other, not one method is better over the other compared to the other. Now, when it comes to population sampling, population is a larger population, right? All people with that characteristic that you want to study. Let's take the example from the previous lecture again. The benefit of fitness session to improve childhood obesity, right? Now, all the children is your population. Children is population, right? Within that population, those children who had taken part in the fitness session is your sample. Okay? So whatever phenomena you want to study, your population is the broader population or the broader range of people which come under that phenomena. Then based on the topic that you need to cover, based on your research project, sample is a subset of that population, is a small number of people that you need to be covering in that research project. It can be a survey, it can be one-to-one interviews, but sample is basically whatever's part of your research project from that broader population. Again, sample is a small group of people which you will be accessing for that specific research project, and population is a broader term from which you are going to do your sampling, which you need to take your sample from. Now, what research instrument is any research method or tools and technique that you're going to be using as part of your research instrument. About the instrument, it needs to be part of your research project or your research proposal. So you need to tell the reader about which instrument that you're going to be using. Let's say survey designed on SurveyMonkey, survey designed on Microsoft Teams, or one-to-one interviews conducted face-to-face using this recording tool, or one-to-one interviews conducted on Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is your instrument in this case, or tool. Before we move forward, last thing that we need to discuss is a literature review. Literature review can be a broad term, like you do your literature review, and it is a type of research project, right? Literature review is, as the name suggests, is review of the literature. You search the literature and then you do an in-depth analysis of it and report the findings, and that's a literature review. It's actually identifying and analyzing whatever is relevant to your specific study, whatever is relevant to your specific project, right, or your research problem. What's the purpose of the literature review is to determine what's already there. Okay, I've chosen childhood obesity, I'm going to do my literature search, and that will be the literature review. I want to determine what's already known about the topic, and then I want to know why is there any gap in the literature. That means, is there anything that previously not been discussed by any of the researcher, or is there any unanswered question, or is there anything that I can focus my research on. Now, what are the sources for the literature review? You can be reading your books, you can be using reading articles, your internet website, your databases, or any of the reports. But you can search all of that online as well. You can read the books online, you can read journal articles on Google Scholar and any other database. You can read internet like WHO or any other website, or you can search for databases online, and you can read the reports online as well. So you could do all of this online, or you can do it in hard format as well. You can read the hard copy of the books, or you can read the hard copy of the reports or whatever. But these are the sources that make a literature review. Now, research plan. This is for the next lecture. So far in the lecture 2, you should have picked a research topic. You should have now, for the next lecture, before lecture 3, now that you're aware of research methodologies, you're aware of the types of the research, you should be choosing a research design, and then you should be doing some literature search. This is your homework. Whatever topic you've chosen, just go through this reliable sources, like go through Google Scholar, read relevant journal articles, or go on the websites like NHS, WHO, NIHR, and do some research on the topic. This will be for the next week. A quick summary: we've covered research methodology, we've covered qualitative, quantitative research, then we've covered the types of research. Again, none of these types is better than the other. They both hold as much importance as the other in the research world. It depends on the choice of the method, or it depends on the choice of the topic that you're choosing, which method you can be using. They're just different from each other, and they both have strengths and weaknesses. That's all for now. Thank you very much. This was your lecture 2. For next week, we will be choosing research methodology for your chosen topic. And this was all for lecture 2. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you in the next lecture.